Hello, are we all of us here? Okay, well, I'll start. Hello, welcome to this video conference. Apparently we are only 4 of us, but sounds crazy. Is it okay, Margarita? Okay, sorry. Yes. So welcome to this little conference, a tour of different castles in Europe. So the main idea of EHH is for us to discover some treasures from other countries in Europe, and at the same time to discover the places, but to discover also how we do work and how we do maintain our monuments, which is a very interesting topic for all of us, as you know. So you have the scale of EHH, and inside you have Next Gen, who is more dedicated to the new generation, looking forward with inspiring ideas, and which is ready to exchange those great ideas. At the French scale, we have Les Audacieux du Patrimoine, who created this way. And we are very happy to welcome you. Feel free to ask some questions. Margarita will follow them afterwards. And the idea is really to have you to discover some fantastic place, and at the same time, to be able to get some glimpses on how others do to maintain their places. So I wish you a great visit, because we have different steps today. And I leave the voice to Marc just now, Domaine Royal d'Amboise. See you soon and have a good tour.
Attends, il a désactivé la vidéo. Il faut qu'il réactive. Demande-lui. Can you allow the video, please? Il nous a coupé notre vidéo.
C'est vous qui pouvez le faire normalement de votre appareil.
Non, je peux pas. L'autre l'a désactivé, c'est marqué.
Ah, Margarita, do you mind to re-establish the video of Marc, please?
Mais je peux pas, regarder. L'autre l'a désactivé.
Wait a second. Sorry for these little details. As you know, we are very efficient in all just with old buildings, but new technologies are always tricking us. But don't worry, we'll arrive soon.
Ok, c'est bon.
Voilà.
Okay, good afternoon to all and everyone. I am Marc Lelandais. I'm the owner and manager of the Domaine Royal of Château Gaillard in Amboise, and we're very happy to welcome you in this famous or trendy and great palace in the heart of Amboise. In the heart of this city of Amboise, 15 hectares have been dedicated to the royal paradise of the French king Charles VIII. He was the first one to conquer the Italian country and the cities all over Italy, and he came back after this conquest of with 10,000 knights. He came back here in France, in Amboise, with 22 artisans, and these artisans were led by a monk, a Benedictine monk. His name was Don Pacello de Mercogliano. Don Pacello was a genius. He was a genius of the art of green. He was the first landscape designer and let's say landscape master architect of the kings. He was working for Ferdinand d'Aragon. Ferdinand d'Aragon was the king of Naples at this time, and the city of Naples was 1 million population at this moment. So it was a great city in Europe. This palace of Ferdinand d'Aragon, his name was Poggio Reale. Poggio Reale was basically something totally new as a palace in the Roman style and in this antique style, the first one. Laurent de Médicis came to Poggio Reale in Naples and said that it was the most exquisite thing he has been seeing ever under the sun. Just to tell you how genius and how great was the art of green of Pacello de Mercoliano. Pacello de Mercoliano arrived here in France, in Amboise, at 50 years old, and he died at 87 years old. His life was absolutely immense and crazy. He became the master gardener of the three French kings of the Renaissance, Charles VIII, Louis XII, and Francis I. Here you have, here in Amboise, the Domaine Royal of Château Gaillard is the dream of the king, which was established and created by Don Pacello de Mercoliano. He was a genius and he was creating lots of things. For instance, within his heart of green, I cannot show you everything about, of course, the gardens and the first Renaissance gardens in France, which have been implemented here, of course. But you can see already this atmosphere of the landscape. You are here in what we would say and call at this time the paradise, the royal paradise. And you have always 4 rivers in the paradise: the milk, the beer, the cider, and water, of course. Here you see in the center the fountain of youth, which we call the Fontana della Giovinezza. That's all the story of Pacello and all these symbolic things that he was establishing and creating everywhere. You can see here the first orangery, which has been set up in France and transplanted from Naples to Amboise. He created this orangery in the cave, directly in front of like a red nose, you know, of the castle, in front of the castle, so, which gives a very particular and peculiar atmosphere. You can see the palm trees, etc. We do have here a collection of 200 citrus and orange trees, which is a real conservatory of citrus. The reason is very simple. The French king, Charles VIII, invited Pacello to come back in Amboise with his 22 artisans, founding the first Renaissance in France. And Pacello was the Pope of citruses. He transplanted here the first orange trees in France. So he could not, of course, acclimate them properly under the cold in the winter time. So he had to create many things to really transplant these orange trees. The orangery, which name was the Limonaia, but also the cash trays for the tracks of the orange trees. At this time, they were barrels; they were not squared. He also founded here many things and transplanted many other European Mediterranean trees. The guy was incredible, this monk, because he, as I told you, he arrived at 50 years old and died at 87. He was offered the royal domain of Château Gaillard by the French king forever, which is a unique case in the French history for a servant to acquire a royal domain. What is absolutely amazing is that this complete landscape and domain has been preserved for 500 years without any additional construction of the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. Among his creations here, he has been also creating the plum, Reine Claude, the Queen Claude, the famous plum. And he offered it to the queen's, to the king's wife, who was the Reine Claude. Now, after this very small tour in these first Renaissance gardens, take a look to the facade. The Palazzo Otto is a unique example of the French Renaissance, with an incredible corniche at the top of 1.20 meters, divided in 4 different layers, as you can see, all sculpted in 1500. Unfortunately, 15 minutes ago, there was some sun. You don't have sun, but you have another atmosphere, which is good. Look at the gardens from the top. And you can see this very primitive gardens, very geometric, with the fontaine in the center, and the view, of course, within the city of Amboise, of 15 hectares of wood, forest, gardens, and park. trees are all here, dating from 200, 300 years ago. And you can see this facade, which is really unique in its example, with really a geometric architecture à la Bramante, as we say it, with the glass windows, which we'll see inside. Let's go inside. Follow me. Was meter. So here, 1 hectare was really incredible for this period. And which are absolutely an explosion of Mediterranean. Follow me to the castle. So it's been entirely between 2012 and 2017 by 300 workers, 40 companies, and 12 master craftsmen. The renovation and restoration has been a very complex one to do because we had to, of course, subtract the 19th century and restore everything in the mood, in the style of this period. Take a look to the chimney. It is dating from the first Renaissance, and it's an exceptional example of this rinceau and sculpted pieces of the French Renaissance. Take a look also to this coffer, which is a wedding coffer of the King Francis I and his queen, the Reine Claude. The Palazzotto has been entirely furnished with exclusive art collection from the Renaissance. Here you are facing a very nice painting from the 16th century in Venice with a gondole bachique. Then a painting from the Titien over there. And you have to imagine that at this moment, the French knights were discovering something extremely new for them. Color. Look at the Majolique. They arrived in Italy, and what they discovered there were all these colors, among also everything about ladies' featuring and makeup, which was new at this moment. Look at the glass windows. The glass windows, all the windows have been redone for 4.90 meters of height in 6 windows, and they are made of Saint-Just manufacture, which is a very unique glass polychrome with 6 to 9 colors per windows, and the medallions. Medallions are telling the story of the place. Look at this. Here you have the Fontana della Giovinezza with the 4 rivers of paradise. All the windows have been decorated and redone in order to create a unique atmosphere. We're here in another, after the Grand Salon, we are here in another salon, which is the Salle Louis XII. And the Salle Louis XII is very famous for all the portraits of the French kings and the women of the French kings. You have the Reine Claude, you have Marie de Médicis, you have Diane de Poitiers. And take a look to this amazing. This is Arcimboldo. Arcimboldo, the spring, as you know, he has been designing the 4 seasons as a painter. And Christian Dior, Mr. Dior, ordered in Ravello 4 sculpture of Ravello. we have lost 2 of them, and now we've just rediscovered the summer, which we are showing for in a preview this year here. Look at this. This is the paradise on Earth, and it's coming from the Palazzo Pitti in Florence. And look at the 12 different colors of stone telling the story of the paradise. The birds, the grapes. That's just an amazing art object. Let's go through here and say hello to the new Doge de Venise. His name is Max. He is our lab. And here we have Kumi, the knight, and Kumi is our cat here. Animals are very important here, as you can feel it. Take a look to this also, another majolique of Ravello. Absolutely amazing. The French guys discovered Italy, discovered women in Italy, Naples, and they brought back with them a sickness, which we call the Naples sickness, by the way. We are here in the salle du Cardinal de Guise, of the Cardinal de Guise. He was very famous, he was Prime Minister of the King, and this is his dining room. Look at the chimney, which is a fireplace, which is from the first Renaissance. You can see here the colonne d'ambiance, as we say. That's typical of the French Renaissance, and it's very fun. We are 4 years after Christophe Colomb. That's not a lot. The atmosphere has been changing heavily. The painting, you will never find the orangeries in a painting, because the orange is the golden apple of the paradise. So it was forbidden to show the oranges. Here we are in the curiosity cabinet. As you know, everything needs this curiosity cabinet. And we have very special things here, such as this veilleuse of the mariage de Louis XII and Anne de Bretagne, signed by Sanson. Take a look to the mask over here. You see, when you were having problem with the justice in the old time, you had to wear this mask, and you had to wear the mask of your theme. So imagine if you were to something like heavy taste or whatever, you had to bring and to carry the mask of your theme. You know, there are many things in this place. The babies were drinking beer at this time because water was not proper to drink. Take a look to for instance, this is an archet. It's very nice wood. All of it. Furniture in the 16th century furniture, so it gives a kind of very interesting feeling, which is rare in a castle. You're not in a castle 18th century, middle-aged courtyard, a unique example of a courtyard. And we will end by the longest stone is 4 meters long, but not. Has been entirely renovated. Here we are. Another place. We're on the terrace of the chapel, back to the different gardens and the terrace. So, thank you very much for this very short visit. We had to go through very fast, show you overviews. The place here is amazing. The rain is very rare, as you can see today. We have a little bit of rain, which is also nice for the green. Pacello was a genius. Our famous neighbor, Leonardo da Vinci, knew him. He lived over his death until 1534. And we are very happy to welcome you anytime. We're open all year long from 11 to 7 o'clock. Thank you to European Historic Houses for this organization of this video tour. And I will pass the word now to our Portuguese friends of the Palacio Granada. And thank you very much. Enjoy the time and enjoy the tour.
Okay.
No.
Assim. Agora ela não fez. Desculpa, aqui. WhatsApp. Você falou. Ok. Como é isto? Ok.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Anadia Palace. Boa tarde, sejam bem-vindos. My name is Sofia Macedo. I am the Heritage Coordinator here at Palácio Anadia. And with me is Filipe Amaral. Hello, Filipe. Good afternoon.
Olá, boa tarde, bem-vindos. Welcome, everyone.
And so we'll take you on a tour of our magnificent 18th century manor house. And I hope you will enjoy. And thank you to this wonderful event by the European Historic House. So let's come inside and get to know the Anadia Palace. It's not just a manor house. It's not just a stately home. It's a huge estate that has this wonderful Baroque palace, a garden, and also pristine wood. So the main goal of this house is not just for leisure or recreation. It has also a productive one. It has also always have been a productive house, a farmhouse, an agricultural manor house. And still today, we produce some of the finest wines of the down countrysides. We are located in Mangualde. Mangualde is a city near Viseu, up north Portugal, where we are on the down wine territory, and we have about 120 acres entirely walled in the center of the city, as you might have known by the entrance of the house with all the cars passing and so on. So, a little bit of history. The family settled here around the 16th century. It is still the same family that owns the place until today, still lives in the place, and still takes care of the entire property. So in the 18th century, the house was commissioned. This big house that you are seeing was commissioned, and construction started around 1724. It lasted for about 100 years, a little bit less, but 100 years. One of the main features of this beautiful palace, of this stately home, is obviously tiles. If not, we are in Portugal, so we do have tiles, wonderful, magnificent tiles that were specially commissioned for this house, and they were ordered in the school of Coimbra, of the masters of Coimbra. So they were specifically designed for the place, and they were inspired by the engravings of the Vanneria Real, the Savoy Palace of Turin. So you will find here lots of issues around hunting, around the virtues that are associated to noblemen, to noble virtues, and so on. So this is like a sort of lesson that you learn when you walk around the stairs and enter the major wing, so the noble wing. The palace is divided basically in two sides. The downside, which is well, it's the everyday life, and the upper floor, which is the noble floor, where all the the receptions and the special events took place. And in the main room of the Palace of Vanadia is what we call the noble room. So in here, in this grand hall, the Lord would receive all these guests and all the personalities that came to visit here, the Palace of Vanadia. And yes, obviously, the chosen tiles reflect the taste of the 18th century. So they would bet on mythological themes, classical themes, and this is what is that you can see here in the Vanadia Palace. Big compositions of tiles, blue and white tiles, 18th century tiles that will tell you about this family, these individuals, these people, and their relationship with their environment. In 18th century architecture, and this house keeps its prime design very much intact still. So in this 18th century architecture, you don't have corridors, so you go from room to room. And this is not, and this is one example of that. So from the grand room, we step into another room, a smaller one, a more cozier one, perhaps a more intimate one, but also a room that when there would be venues and events here, people could scatter and, converse in smaller groups. And why we call it the statue room? Because mid-18th century, the family Okay, so we lost a little bit connection here. Okay, 18th century architecture is not favorable. We're talking about the biscuit porcelains, a gift from the King of Naples, to the family. They represent the figurines that were being found in the excavations of Pompeii. So pretty much about the same era, about the same time. So everything very contemporary. And the family has strong connections to Italy, not just because there is some lineage, some family connection, but as well as through the very important stately functions that some members of the family occupied in current Italy. By then, not so. So from that room, we passed into another grand room, which we call the ballroom, not just necessary for balls, but for music events, venues, art venues, and so on. One of the most curious things about this room, obviously, the tiles, as well as in most parts of this palace, but the tiles tells us about not just the classical themes that we saw in the grand in the noble room or in the staircase, but the tiles here tells us about something pretty different. For instance, in here we have the gentleman, the husband, that stays at home, takes care of the kids and of the house, while the lady goes out and make a living for the all housework hold. And if in 21st century this is not uncommon, imagine in 18th century a noble and aristocratic family, this will not be a very normal thing, and probably some subject to some laughter. The entire room is filled with tiles that explain this, the wrong way or the wrong nature of a man's life. We call it the world turned upside down. It's a collection called The World Turned Upside Down. And for instance, the world is really turned upside down in this room because the moon and the sun are below, and on the upper hemisphere is cities and earth. So what was the goal? It was to make laugh, to entertain, to just produce talk. We don't know, but it has it's a rare and unique tiling theme here in Palace Anadia that is worthwhile your visit, because there is many other thematic that we can see in the world turned upside down. Another of the most significant room of this house, this great manor house, is the dining room. So people dine, people entertain, we dine, we eat supper, we eat lunch, and for that we have a huge room that we can prepare for that. So the room also takes into consideration what was being found in the archaeological excavations of Pompeii. It somehow takes inspiration from those excavations and produces this. It's not fresco, it's painted walls, not frescoes, okay, but it depicts what was being found in Italy, in Pompeii. So the dinnerware was also made especially for the family, the Pais do Amaral family, the same family that bought the property, occupied the property, and still occupies it. And you can see it, for instance, that it was made in Naples, this particular one, in 1804. Obviously, when you come to visit the house, you cannot do this to the plates, but well, it's a perk that I can show you and invite you to get to know the house a little bit better, and all these features that we can show you here in Palacio Anadia. So, of course, that I told you earlier on that the palace it's not just this big house, it's a whole estate. And from this balcony, the south balcony, we call it the loggia, it's our little loggia, this archways, the owner could see the entire estate. And especially he would stay here and look at the central courtyard, and through the central courtyard, the everyday life of this palace would take place. Farming activities, agricultural activities, wine activities. It would all occur under this great maple tree. It's a notable tree. It has like 300 years old. It's a 300 years old tree. And from here, he could control, well, what was going on his domains and what was being done. Obviously, the grandness of this balcony, this veranda, can be seen also in the magnificent wooden ceiling. It's wood, it's painted, it's polychromous. So it's another rare feature that we can find here in Palácio Anadia, near Viseu, Mangualde, Viseu. So our little tour will end here in the balcony. And of course, from here, we go to Ireland, to Shanghai Castle. Hello, Ireland. We are open to public visits. We opened into 2018. Last year, during the pandemic, we opened our gardens. So come and visit. You're welcome. And since we are wine producers, cheers.
Hello, my name is Ruben Cope. You're very welcome to Ireland. Thank you very much to our friends in Portugal. Well, it's a lovely day here today. We're at Shanghai Castle in Paulstown, County Kilkenny. Fáilte Roimh, Goodie Era. This is Shanghai Castle. It began as a tower house. You can see the central piece here. It was a tower house built by the butlers of Kilkenny Castle to defend themselves against the likes of Cromwell unsuccessfully. Later on, it was transformed into a Queen Anne house by Peter Elwood, who married Elizabeth Butler, one of the butlers from Kilkenny Castle. And he, I think, in fact, bought the place off his uncle-in-law, his wife's uncle, just to secure it. He paid £1,000 to buy 1,000 acres of land. We are at the back of the house. There is a sunken lawn here, which used to be part of a longer canal that has been shortened and sort of made more sort of romanticized with its dimples to the side. But I'll show you a bit closer around the house. We have, like in the first place in France, an orangery, but not maybe as elaborate as the one. So this, let me explain. So Shanghai Castle was originally a tower house in the middle, and then in 1708, Peter Elwood turned it into a Queen Anne house, building 2 bays each side. And it was a much taller house than it seems now, because later on they brought the ground level up to create a basement area. And then later on in 1850, they added on a service wing to accommodate all the servants and the kitchen areas. While we're here, I'll show you this sundial. It's of Scottish descent. There was a lady that married in here. Her name was Isabella Forbes. She was a widow from another house nearby, Dunleckney Manor, and she was quite wealthy and brought quite a lot of money. So in the 1850s, she spent quite a lot here. You'll see the stable yard in a moment, and you will see, the orangery closer up. They went on a visit to Italy on their honeymoon, James Elwood and Isabella Forbes, and they were inspired, and such things were built. There was another conservatory built here in around the 1860s. It had 10 good years and 50 good years and 50 bad years. The rust eventually got into the steel, and it rotted away, and all the curved glass. It was attributed to Sir Joseph Paxton, who built the Crystal Palace in London. Let me show you the front of the house. So we live here. I live here with my wife, my child, but my parents are still living in the main house. We are farming. We have a suckler herd of cows. We do organic beef, and we also do organic tillage. We're doing oats and wheat this year for a local bill. Let me bring you inside. This is my father, Jeffrey. Hello. Come on in, you're very welcome. Hello. So this is the main hall. It's quite dark in here today, but it's, as usual, the paintings are mostly my mother's paintings and some of my sisters. My mother is Elizabeth Cope. She's been painting all her life. It's something that she can't not do. Shankill actually started, it got its name from an old church, which is just a few 100 yards or less from the main house. And it was a pre-Reformation church. It was in use just as a graveyard up until 1911 was the last burial. And it, maybe Jeffrey, you can tell us a little bit more. Jeffrey's a historian.
Tell you about
the church.
The old church, we don't have a date for it, but it's been ruined since the time of the Reformation. That would be 16th century. And it originally, the property then belonged to the Butler family, and the Butlers married into a family called Elwoods, and the Elwoods married into a family called Tollers. And this is Nicky Toller Aylward here, who is Phoebe, our daughter's godmother, I think. And we bought the house from Nicky and her sister, her two sisters, in 1990. And we moved here in 91. The house is still much the same as it was in their time, except for Elizabeth's paintings and Phoebe's paintings. It could do with, a revamp of a few million spent on it. If anyone wants to give us the money. But we kind of accept it in its shabbiness, and it's very good for my collection of country furniture.
Thank you very much. So I will introduce you to Peter Elwood. He is here. He is the man that turned the Tower House into Queen Anne House. He was originally from Faithlake in County Waterford, and he's the man who I told you about who borrowed £1,000 to buy 1,000 acres of land here. And his wife, Elizabeth Butler, she in fact inherited the house from her uncle, but then her husband had to he paid £1,000 because he was worried that her brother would claim ownership of it as well. Her portrait has the sort of eyes that stare at you around the room. And there's a story of a man who was having dinner here at the table one night, and he was getting drunker and drunker until he shouted out that lady must stop staring at him, or he will shoot her. So he took out a gun and he actually shot the portrait, which it has been repaired, and he hit her right into the heart, and even the wall behind had to be repaired as well. Later on, her portrait was enlarged for some reason. We're not sure. Maybe it's because she felt she was more important than her husband. She wanted a bigger portrait, or she predeceased her husband. Maybe it was because he worshipped his wife a bit, but he wanted to have a large painting. We'll continue into the ante room. This is the ante room. It's a typical Queen Anne room. It's smallish and squarish. It has a corner fireplace. One quite obvious difference between the Queen Anne and the later extension in 1826 is the Queen Anne doorways are much sort of slimmer and elegant, as this doorway here behind us is from 1826, and it's a lot wider. There is a story of a couple going to the dining room, quite a portly couple, and they got through this door arm in arm together, but in the next doorway they got wedged right into the doorway. Neither of them wanted to give up. And this is the drawing room. As I said, built on in 1828. It was built first as the dining room. There was a long table that stretched the full length of the room. Then in 1850s, it was done up. They brought the mirrors from France. They came from the port in Waterford to here by horse and cart, and a matching overmantel. And this is the room where the conservatory was built on here. I'll bring you briefly. All the portraits are by my mother in here. A lot of her nudes are in here. There's also bells that run all throughout the house. They run sort of on a mechanical system with weights and pulleys, and all the bells ring downstairs. You'll see them. And every room in this house has 2 doors. And up until a few years ago, myself and my sister used to run ghost tours here. We did about 15 nights in a row around Halloween time, and we would scare people quite a lot. And it was quite fun. It just got too much. There was one point where the man living upstairs, when everybody was in the attic, there could have been 20 people. He couldn't open one of his doors because of the weight of all the people in the room. So that became the end of our ghost tours. We decided it was too much on the house. This is the main staircase, and we just passed another little staircase there. The servant staircase is right next to it. The wallpaper is sienna marbleized wallpaper. It's even dated from September the 10th, 1880. Here's another bell. This is the bell that would call the children down from the nursery. I think you might be able to hear it there. Children were obviously seen and not heard, but they were put away up in the nursery, and the nanny would bring them down to have maybe tea with their parents. I'll quickly show you inside the orangery, and then we'll go back into the basement. And my mother likes to paint in here. It's bright. When she's babysitting our little daughter, she likes to paint too. Keeps her busy. Anyway, it's very bright in here and can get very warm. It was heated, of course, because we wouldn't have the heat as you would in other parts of Europe. But the pipes were all cast iron, and they didn't really last, and they caused more damage in the house in all this time when they rusted. So they were all removed. It's not too dark. We'll go down to the basement. My father, of course, is a big collector of all sorts of stuff. So he's got all sorts of stuff here. Let's see. Just have a quick look at some of these. So now we're in the oldest room in the house. It's the bottom of the tower, and it would have been the first kitchen. The kitchen in this house has moved so many times. This would have been the first kitchen. Then in 1828, it moved right down to the other end, and the dining room was above it at the time. Then in 1850s, the kitchen moved into the service wing when that was built down here. And then in the 1960s, it moved upstairs because the man of his house, his wife slipped on the staircase, bringing his dinner up to the day's talk in the dining room. And instead of him coming down to eat in the kitchen, he built the kitchen upstairs. And then in 2005, the kitchen moved back downstairs. Kitchen, 5 kitchens in this house alone. So this is what we call the old kitchen. It dates from 1850. And it's interesting because it still has the black range. So many houses of this scale, they were ripped out for scrap metal and replaced with sort of agas and other ovens that fit the same sort of inlet into the wall. And this room it's purpose-built as a kitchen. It has lovely high ceilings and windows from both sides. Even though we're in the basement, but then again, it's an artificial basement because the ground level was brought up. And I'm going to bring you down to the yard now to see my mother's studio. So we'll quickly try and get down there as quickly as possible without delaying you. So the old churchyard, which I mentioned, which Shankill gets its name, the Irish for old church is Shankill. is just in here to the graveyards around it. We won't get to see it now. And then the service wing that was built on is just there. We have around 10 hectares rather of gardens and woodlands and other pleasure grounds, including about 2.5 hectares of walled gardens, which we're getting slowly back into production. We have a cafe here as well, so the cafe has meant that people come a lot more to visit the gardens, and we have now an outlet for our fruit and vegetables. We also one day hope to have on the menu some meals that will be totally from this place here. We have, of course, our own beef and our own wheat to make bread, and our own potatoes and tomatoes. And so hopefully we'll have a few meals on offer that will not have travelled at all. Will have just been from the farm, which is quite exciting. So we're coming into the stable yard, or the hunt yard now, built in 1850, originally designed to be in Dunleckney Manor, around 5 or 6 miles away. But then Isabella Forbes, her husband there, died, so she brought her money here. It's attributed to Daniel Robertson. He also designed the front gate lodge and a few other buildings around here. We're quite lucky to be in an area that has quality stone. The family would have owned a lot of limestone quarries, and just over the River Barrow there is a lot of granite mines, or quarries rather. So we get the best of the both here. I do a bit of art as well. That's one of my pencils, and this here is our cafe. When we're open, due to restrictions, we're still closed, but we hope to be open soon. And welcome you all here for some coffee and cake, and maybe a burger and chips, all grown here eventually. We have a few cottages here as well that people live in. There's artist residence, and people like to come, especially because my mother is a painter. They like to come and experience her studio as well. So I'll just show you some of my mother's paintings. This is my mother here.
Hello. How are you?
This is Elizabeth Cope. So we're just having a quick look around your studio before we bring you to the next place. We're going to Chateau de Vauville next, and so I hope you're there, Chateau de Vauville, for the next. So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody at the European Historic Houses and also Historic Houses of Ireland. So hopefully Chateau de Vauville are there, and we will sign out. And thank you very much from us here in Ireland. Thank you.
C'est bon? Hello everyone, and welcome back to France. You are here in Normandy, the very far west of Normandy by the sea, in a place called the Cotentin. It's this region in Normandy, far west. And here you are in the village, the small village of Vauville. I'm standing in front of the castle of Vauville, that is in my family since 1890. And after the Second World War, my grandfather has created an amazing botanical garden. Today is 5 hectares. We're going to have a walkthrough. We can mention a little bit the castle, obviously. It has been built since the 12th century. You can see some very nice local tiles with this blue and green aspects. And you have very big walls, approximately 1 meter thick walls, and very nice stained glass windows at the first floor. You have also a very nice view at the terrace of the tower. And the tower has been in this style since the 15th century, and the two aisles since the 17th century. It has evolved during the years, and it's now my home. I'm living here in Vauville since 2017. After my father passed away, I took over the garden and all the estate. My grandfather, who started the garden, was a chemical engineer and a perfumer in the fragrance industry. And my father was an architect and landscape designer. So I've been growing here since 1983. And I was living in Paris before, producing some documentaries and some films. But I always took care of Vauville, and this place I really love. You will see it's has become a little paradise with different species from the southern hemisphere. And we're going to have a little walkthrough so you can see all the flowers in blossom. The particularity of Vauville is that it's only composed with evergreen plants from the southern hemisphere. So it's approximately 1,000 species that we have in the garden, and you have 22 different places. And what you probably don't see is that we're very close to the sea. And the real challenge was to create a garden that can protect some rare plants because they are all coming from the southern hemisphere. So there is a real acclimatization work that we have been working on since 72 years. And as the garden got bigger, it was really necessary to have windbreakers, to have big species that would protect the more fragile ones. We can have a last look at the castle before going in the garden. It's really a nice place. I like to live in. It's a lot of work because the roof must be repaired. So every year we try to do some works piece by piece. So here was the wall. And after this wall, it was only a field with cows and horses. It's from this place that everything started. And we started with palm trees. You will see we have 2 palm groves here in the garden. And we use this place because it's protected from the wind. And the wind, when it rains here in Normandy, the wind comes from the sea and the water is full of salt. So it's very important to have those windbreakers and those big species that can protect. It's important to always keep in mind that it was just a field with cows. There was absolutely nothing. Here we have a lot of eucalyptuses. Eucalyptus that originally grows in Australia. We also see a lot in the Mediterranean Sea. We have a lot of species from China that we are going to see, like this Maonia, for example. And my father, who was an architect, really liked to put also some sculptures. So the garden is nicknamed the Traveler's Garden. So we have in different places some statues, some sculptures, like this. Here is the back of a Buddha head. And during the visit, you can see many different pieces of stone and usually pieces that you can find also in houses. So everything also was created originally from here because we needed those big trees that are cypress coming from California to also protect from the winds coming from the east. So we could be able to then plant between the wall and the big trees that were protecting the small species like hydrangeas. Hydrangeas, they are in blossom in July and August during the summer. We have trees from Chile, for example. This one has a very nice smell of bubble gum. It smells like banana. It's very interesting. We have this very nice cypress from Kashmir in Himalaya. And let's continue the visit this way. We have always been planting trees and plants here in Vauville. I'm the third generation to take care of the garden. And the idea is to really always keep in mind to find plants that are evergreens and from the southern hemisphere. So we have a really harmonious garden. Here it's more a part of a little forest that will lead us to the first palm grove and all the rhododendrons and azaleas. And it's quite interesting because here we have a natural, I would say, stream of water coming all year long. Here on the left, we will cross the bridge. We have some water coming from the valleys, and we have a very interesting system, very natural, that brings to the garden some water all year long. So when there are some droughts here, we are sure to have here like a dam. And after we can open with different gates some water that goes in the guneras, for example. Guneras are plants that we have in Brazil and in Chile, and that are growing here in Vauville. They need a lot of water. Let's see the palm grove we're approaching to. My father was very keen on this palm tree. We call Trachycarpus fortunei. It was coming from China and has been discovered in the 19th century by Robert Fortune. And this hairy palm tree is very interesting because it resists to minus 15 degrees. Here in the Cotentin, the temperatures are quite cool all year long. It's not too hot during the summer and not too cold during the winter. That's why we are able to acclimate some species from South Africa, some from Chile or Argentina, or even Australia and Tasmania. It's really a cool temperature that doesn't hurt the plants that are coming here in Vauville. And this microclimate exists thanks to the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream, you know, is this warm current that goes in the Atlantic and makes a buckle in front of the Channel Islands. Because here in Vauville, we're in front of Jersey, Guernsey, Sark, and Alderney. And it's very quiet and peaceful. And this warm current brings very, very nice temperature all year long. Oops. So you have a very, very wide atmosphere. We feel completely somewhere else. And it was the idea to really disconnect from the reality and forget also a little bit about Normandy, you know. We have nice palm trees and azaleas that you can see in blossom. And we have planted some proteas, some also plants from Australia like Banksia. We have a very interesting Wallemia pine. But let's see what can be in flower this part. A very nice pine tree. We go back near the water where we have the water trough. The water trough is where the cows and the horses were drinking because it was originally in the field where the little river was passing by. And we made it a pond, very interesting one. We have also a lot of bamboos here in the garden, very important as a windbreaker, you can see, because after we have some smaller plants here. Today is a very nice day. We have no wind, but we always feel protected here. This Camassia is very nice, as you can see today. It's the best season to see it in blossom. And we're going to walk under those very nice, en anglais, comment on dit ça en anglais? Cryptomeria japonica. So Cryptomeria japonica is those very nice trees from Japan. You are going to see the next one completely lying on the floor. So it's interesting here because we play with the shade. We play with the species who likes the shades, the species who likes full sun, and we have also some big trees who gives a lot of acidity. So we always have to keep that in mind when we are planting. So have a look at these trees, amazing. Continue to grow. The trees here in Beauville knows that there are some winds because we're going to have a look at the sea, and they just protect themselves. So they prefer to stay on the ground and protected by the walls. That's why they have those amazing shapes, as you can see here now. This plant is very useful also in the garden. We use it as a very nice windbreaker. It's called Phormium tenax. It's coming from New Zealand, very strong. Just mind your head. Bamboos again, very useful, very, very dense and thick. We have here this amazing plant coming from China, and you can see that the young leaves look like velvet. You see, it's a bit like some fur, or you have the normal leaf, and then you have very soft, very, very nice. And we have here this little tree that you use to make the green tea. That's the Thea sinensis. Thea sinensis, you cut the new, fresh, young leaves, and then you make it dry, and you drink some tea. It's very interesting to have all this diversity here in the garden, because I also try to collect some plants from the Southern Hemisphere that gives fruit or gives vegetable, and that allows you to, get the collection more and more interesting and more big also. This plant we can see here is very interesting. It's Euphorbia mellifera. You can see this very nice shape. And it's the favorite plant of the bees because we have 6 honey beehives, in the garden, and we make our own honey. And it's exactly the smell of this plant. Very, very dense, very prolific. And you should smell right now. It's very sweet and very, very tasty. We enter here the water garden with some plants like this one coming from Southern Africa, Elegia capensis. We have also the beginning of the flowering of the Libercia grandiflora that comes from New Zealand. Very charming plant that grows by the water. And as you can see also by the water, we have the Gunnera manicata that I mentioned, and that really likes the water. It's, you see, 200, 300 meters away. So it's quite amazing. Today the day is very nice, but you have to think of the storms and the winds that can be very strong during all the winter. This plant is also one of our stars in the garden. It's coming from Madeira, and we call it Echium pininana. This is the first year of the plant, and then the second year it climbs and it grows at 2 or 3 meter high. And it flowers. It's quite amazing. And then it dies, but luckily it spreads everywhere naturally in the garden. Let's keep on the tour. We have some nice iris also. And what is interesting with the Gunnera manicata is that it has this hand shape. And as I said, this plant really likes the water and likes to drink a lot. So when it rains, it simply collects the water, very cleverly. And as it's open, it can drown then along along this arm and goes directly to feed the heart that you can see here. It's always strange, this plant, because it's a bit scary. It looks like it's come from the prehistoric times. Like another plant we're going to see just after, I really like. You probably know this Cortaderia celoana also, coming from Argentina. It makes a very nice white feather in autumn. So this is one of the plants I really like, the Pseudopanax lesonii, with this very nice and interesting shape. Looks quite old, you know. And this grows from centuries in the forest of New Zealand. We just planted a tree from the same species, I would say. And it's interesting to have in your garden when you plant some subspecies from the same species, because you can compare them and have a look at them and see the difference and the texture and all their aspect and their physical aspects. Botanic can be very precise, you know, so you can believe a plant is not from the same family of another, but they are the same. We have a nice perspective here on what we call the Grand Espace, and we kept this space without rotation to just recall what it was before. It was a field. And you can see the stones probably at the end. It's basically the stones where the animals are scratching their back, like the cows and the horses. Because we are so close to the sea, there are no more trees in the fields. So in our area, we need to have stones so the animals can scratch themselves. Very nice part here. The flowering of the rhododendrons will start in 2-3 weeks. You can already see the beginning of the flower, but what I really like about those ones, they are the rhododendron giacushmanum, and like the neolithia, they have some real leather and velvet under the leaf. It's very soft, it's very interesting, and the particularity of this rhodo is that the beginning of the flower is pink, like behind, and then when the flower is adult, it's completely white. You cannot imagine that you can have two different colors on the same plant. Always watch your back when you walk in the garden, because the eucalyptuses, they are getting, you know, a bit old, and they adapt themselves to the conditions I just talked about. And I thought it was interesting to finish our little tour. Obviously, we didn't see everything because there are 5 hectares and 22 different gardens. But here was a part that my grandfather created with those azaleas from both sides. You can see those very intense colors. We can get a little bit closer. You have also behind me an acacia called also mimosa. You have to imagine it's in February. And here is a little bit of colors for the weekend. And I really wanted to thank everyone who has been part of this little tour. We always mention historic houses with a castle, but there are also a lot of gardens around those castles in France and all over Europe. And I hope you enjoyed. And I also look forward to seeing you here in Normandy soon, maybe this summer. Thank you very much.